Hey everyone, thank you for joining my channel. My name is Tory. I'm a licensed realtor, and today I wanted to bring you some valuable information all about the world of real estate law. So I have a very special guest, Melissa, here, and I will let her give an introduction.
Hi everyone, I am Melissa Douglas from Douglas Law Firm, and here at the firm we practice in real estate, family law, wills, and estates, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me here in your beautiful office.
No problem.
And you know what, the first thing I wanted to do is just start off with how we met.
Yes.
Because I'm a great enthusiastic about networking and making new connections, and so we had actually met at one of the Buzz Conference events.
Amazing event.
But it was a great event, focusing on leaders in the industry 35 and under plus, and it was a great event that we connected at, and we decided let's do some more content together. So thank you for Buzz Conference for connecting us.
Yes, thank you, Virginia.
Okay, so this video is going to be all tailored towards, we'll do the realtor side of things first.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to ask Melissa some great questions that I've been asked by other realtors that I've had myself as well. So as we know, lawyers are one of the most crucial points of the real estate transaction. They do come in at the end sometimes, but their role, we rely on them so much to be able to make sure everything goes smoothly. So one of the questions I wanted to go over is, to that point, at what point do you like to be involved in the real estate transaction?
So I like to be involved as soon as possible, just so that we can look over the agreement of purchase and sale, see if there's anything maybe a little bit different or a little bit funny on the file, just so that we can get more acquainted and do our title searches, and again, just make sure that everything is okay.
Okay, so is that more so like once the agreement is accepted or once it goes firm after the conditions?
I would say once it goes firm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So once all conditions are removed, that's a good time for you to get involved.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's with typical transactions. Is that the same with other types of deals such as pre-construction or assignments, or even when we have to, we'll touch on condos afterwards. But
Yeah. So for those, we should be involved before so that we can review the agreement, especially on assignments. You want the lawyer to review it ahead of time because we're going to be looking at the previous agreement that the original purchaser signed. Then we're going to be looking at the new one and comparing all of the numbers and making sure that it's okay.
Okay, excellent. And that's a great point to make as well. With assignment sales, it's not your typical transaction. It's basically you taking on an agreement that was already in place beforehand.
Right.
So you want to make sure those terms that you're going to be accepting are legitimate ones and that are going to be to your favor.
Yep.
Excellent. And so now just touching back on condominiums, so maybe you can go over, everybody has the question, what is a status certificate? So
Very important. So a status certificate, we're looking for a lot of things. So we're looking to see, does the current owner have any arrears in their common element fees? Very important. We're also seeing the condo corporation. Are they a party to any kind of litigation matter? Do they owe any money? What's the budget like? Is there money in the reserve fund? What are the rules and regulations of the condo? So very important for us to review it ahead of time and then advise the client what's in there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so I get asked the question a lot, what is a good amount to have in a reserve fund? What would be your answer?
It really depends also on the budget and how new the building is and what's gone on in the building.
So that's good to know. So there's no set answer for it,
Yeah.
but things to consider, like you said, is the age of the building, how many units are there, the type of building it is, and just what their budget is. And like I always say, let's leave the details to the professional. So Melissa will be able to look that over, which is great. What happens when the deposit is not given? So we've had a lot of scenarios, especially during COVID, where a lot of people have been offer happy and they put in these offers without considering the financials or without conditions, and then before the deposit is due within that 24-hour period, they decide to back out.
It's happened. I've actually seen it happen. So the first part of the question, usually people put around 5%-ish for the deposit. Again, it really depends. But when somebody backs away, doesn't provide the deposit, and kind of wants to get out of the deal, mind you, I'm going to say this, but I don't practice litigation when it comes to real estate. But I've had this happen, and I've had a litigation lawyer get involved, and they've said technically they don't have to provide the deposit for the contract to be binding. So, but then you have to weigh the pros and the cons. So are you going to push forward and fight for that contract to go through, or do you want to save on time, sign the mutual release, and then put the house back on the market as soon as possible to get another buyer? So I guess that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
It's unfortunate, and it has happened, especially with COVID, that people do commit to buying something. It's unconditional. They then run away and don't provide the deposit, but it's still a binding contract. So I've been told by another litigation lawyer.
And I have been on the buying side where that has happened with my own clients, and they've decided to come off. So that can be a whole other video in itself. But the point being, make sure we as realtors, we are doing our due diligence with our own clients and making sure that they're qualified and that they have a good understanding of this legal commitment that they're getting into. Because once they decide to back out of that deal, even when the deposit hasn't been given, that's still opening up a door to a whole legal ramifications that can come back to them later on. So having that mutual release signed is a great thing to be able to stop any litigation or further action coming.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yeah, so I actually printed out the mutual release because it's so important that you understand the wording that's here, because once you sign the mutual release, the seller can't come back later on to make any claims. So once you sign this, that's done. You're putting the house back on the market, and you can't go after that person again.
Right, so I've even had a scenario where my buyer client decided to back out before the deposit was given, and then we went to give a mutual release, but the seller wasn't going to sign a mutual release until they put the house back on the market and got another offer. Until they got the home sold firm, then they were comfortable signing that mutual release. So sometimes it can be signed in the same day, the next day. Sometimes the seller will refuse to sign it. At that point, you definitely want to make sure you have some legal counsel as to what's next steps to do. Let's touch on just your process of when you get a new client. What are the documents or items that you require from them? What's your next steps?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So when a file comes in, we do have a very strict process. So it goes to the file opener. She opens the file. She gets everything ready for the lawyer and the clerk. Once the file is opened, it then goes directly to the lawyer. They review everything. They call the client. They'll make sure that we have 2 pieces of ID in the file, back and front. They'll ask the important questions like how you're going to take title, joint tenants, tenants in common, if there's more than one person. They'll find out a little bit more about the property. Are they going to be living in it? Is there tenants in the property? Things like that, just to get accustomed to the client and the type of file. Then they'll prepare all of the documents in the back end. So they'll be doing the title search, preparing all of the signing documents, mortgage documents if it's a purchase or a refinance. And then the lawyer will meet with the client to sign everything. That can be done either virtually or in person at one of our 3 office locations. And then on closing day, usually keys are held in a lockbox for the client to get at the property. So they'll receive that code from our office on closing, if it's a purchase,
When you get a file, what are some maybe red flags that you look out for when you're dealing with a typical purchase and sale, whether you're doing the lien searches or title searches and things like that?
Red flags on title searches?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. I would say the most common ones are notice of security interest. That can kind of sometimes be scary. You just want to make sure that in the agreement, if you're on the seller side, You want to be very careful. Make sure you ask your client, do you have any rentals? So do you have a water softener? Do you have any like HVAC equipment, anything that you're leasing and paying on a monthly basis? Because oftentimes those companies will register a notice of security interest, or people call them liens, but it's a notice of security interest on the property, and the client might not even know that. So we've seen that happen where we get the deal, we are acting for the seller, we were acting for the buyer, and we searched title, there was a notice of security interest for a water softener, and in the agreement of purchase and sale, it was just included in the purchase price, but it didn't include it as a rental. So it's on title. That means it has to be paid out. So the seller was pissed and blamed it on the agent. Yeah. Of course. And then on closing, we argued, listen, it has to be paid out. The water softener is included in the purchase price. So our client got the water softener paid out free and clear, and the seller was not happy because it was like $9,000. That's how they get you, those rentals. So be very careful, make sure you do your due diligence, find out what kind of rentals are there, because I would say that's the most common thing that we find on title searches. And then the other stuff are more minor. It can always be dealt with, like if you do a name search on the property, sometimes there is something called a writ of execution that comes back. So it's just a debt that the seller owes to somebody. But sometimes it might not even be them. So they just swear an affidavit that it's not them who owes that debt. Kind of complicated, but yeah, it's just stuff that we're used to that we normally don't talk about behind the scenes, because it usually gets resolved in office, actually, between lawyers. So nothing that we really worry the clients with, unless if it's like a notice of security interest or a writ that is that person that owes that debt.
So let me ask you a lot of scenarios that realtors go through, issues with fencing. So I know personally I've had a closing where it was, I think, a couple of days before closing, and my clients were the buyers, and we went to do our final showing, and the next door neighbor came over saying, oh, by the way, your fence is 2 feet on my property. Make sure you get the sellers to pay for it. Yeah. So we went through a whole rigmarole. So maybe you can speak to that, or speak to some experiences you've had. I know at one point we had to go back and forth with different title insurance companies to see if that's something that it would be covered. It's
usually not. People think that it would be. We actually had somebody ask this question not too long ago that was going through a similar experience, and one of the lawyers in our firm, her dad is a conveyancer. So she actually answered this question very perfectly. So you know what, I'll get back to you on that, but I do know it's something that title insurance usually doesn't cover, because it doesn't directly affect title and the marketability of the property. And she gave a perfect explanation on what would happen. So I will have her answer that question.
Awesome.
For you.
How about easements?
Yep.
Is that something you typically deal with?
Yeah. So in the legal description, when we're doing our title search, if there's any kind of easement subject to whatever it might be, we have to pull those, see exactly what it is, see if it's maybe expired, something that actually affects title and marketability of the property. Okay, so we actually just had this recently on a property where in the legal description, there was an easement about a well that was decommissioned. So that house used to service the houses around it, and they would have access to that well. But it was decommissioned, it's not really applicable anymore, but the buyers wanted that removed from the legal description. It did get removed, but it was just like a whole process that we had to go through.
Okay. And you know, that scenario is actually one that they do go over in our course material, so it's funny to hear it in real life. Because oftentimes when we're looking up the legal name of a property in Geo Warehouse, we'll see a lot of easements registered. Most common ones are utility ones, right? So no concern there to worry about. It's just access that whichever Bell company or Rogers has to the property.
Yeah. The subject to right-of-ways are the more complicated ones, which is what we had.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so those are all my questions regarding the real estate side of real estate laws. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. And please feel free to reach out to Melissa anytime for any questions or clients that you want to work with her on. Her contact information will be down below.
Thank you. And that they can have access to that well.
Sorry.
That's part of it.
Oh my God.
I know.
Oh, I was trying to hold it in.
We can put it at the end. We'll put a blooper reel.
It's gone.
Oh gosh.
That's too funny.
I'll start again.
Water. Okay, give me a second.
Oh my God.
all
I
happening at
didn't even see that part. Oh my God.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Go back
So
over.
I'll just say, I'll start from
Easements, the water well.
okay, yeah. So we just had, okay, hold on.